What's going on, everyone? Today we're breaking down all things about the 2025 Atlanta Falcons, including if both Drake London and Darnell Mooney should be prioritized in fantasy drafts, if Bijan Robinson has a case as the overall RB1 in Fantasyland, what to make of Michael Penix, and if we as a society can finally safely give up on Kyle Pitts. All that and much more here on today's Fantasy Life show. But of course, joining me as always, we have Fantasy Life Director of Analytics, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. And Dwain, let's go ahead and start off with, again, the pass catchers at hand here, because yes, Drake London, fantastic season. Most people are drafting him as a top 10 player at the position, and for good reason, but quietly one of the better, more productive free agent signings of the entire 2024 cycle wound up being ex-Bear Darnell Mooney. So talk about how you see the split going here, obviously with Michael Penix now under center.
Yeah, look, man, London has always been good. It's just been a matter of the offense that he's been in. You know, he had Arthur Smith there for whatever reason, rotating him off the field and just doing weird things like that. So when you look at London, like wide receiver one worthy underlying data every year of his career. But last year, even though Kirk Cousins wasn't good, you put that together with what we got with Michael Penix at the end of the year, it really was the best quarterback play that we have seen for him. Now, guys, it had been terrible before. I mean, we're talking about one of the worst passing offenses in the league the two previous seasons. So whenever you look at him and those underlying data points, Ian, we obviously love that. But, man, if you look at what he did down the stretch, I get it. It's a really small sample with Penix. But, man, 23 fantasy points per game. Dude had a 38% target share with a 3.56 yards per route run. Now, you don't just have to depend on those last three games, though. That's the other beauty. Like I said, with Kirk Cousins, wasn't great, but still was better than what we had seen in the past. If you look at the overall season, 16.5 fantasy points per game, which is an important number, guys, because if you go back to 2011, the average score for a wide receiver in a PPR league finishing in the top 12 as the wide receiver 12 is 16 fantasy points per game. So Drake London, technically, that's a wide receiver one season. 29% target share on the year. Dude, man coverage. 34% targets per route run. Zone coverage, 25% targets per route run. So it doesn't really matter what kind of coverage they're running out here at him. 2.32 yards per route run for the course of the season. That's also elite, man. That's hot. That's top 6 wide receiver stuff. 84 ESPN open score, really nice. 90.1 PFF receiving grade, also top 6 wide receiver worthy. Nice. I honestly think, Ian, we're looking at a situation where it's kind of unfortunate for Drake London. It's fortunate for us as fantasy players because it's like a beautiful time to be alive, but he just so happens to be finally really, really breaking out and getting some quarterback play. But we have Malik Neighbors. We have Nico Collins. We have Brian Thomas Jr. We have these guys that just did their thing last year, I think in a different simulation where all those players aren't sitting there and where the timing's a little different. Drake London would be a first-round pick this year, and he would be worthy of it. Like he really does profile as a low-end to mid-range wide receiver one when you put it all together. So I like buying him in round 2.
I mean, right now he is going off the board as a wide receiver 9, so just ahead of A.J. Brown, Lab McConkey, but Dwain mentioned some of those ballers who are keeping him down just a little bit. When you look at London, I mean, just to see a guy of his size be able to move his feet, especially the way that he can, man, it really is one of these situations where I do wonder how cornerbacks even go about trying to slow this guy down. So maybe he doesn't have the same ability to take the top off a defense like a BTJ or a Neighbors. Again, I would be taking those guys ahead of him, but you just look at when he finally did get Penix out there, Dwain just willing to force feed him the football. I mean, during those 3 games to end last season, London had 39 targets. No other Falcon have more than 12, okay? Darnell Mooney did miss a game in there, so it wouldn't have been as big, but give Mooney 10 more targets in that stretch, and we're still talking about a huge discrepancy. That said, it was only 3 games. Now, I don't think people remember just how well Mooney was doing beforehand, Dwayne. And we're talking about weeks 1 through 14 last year, all right? 14-game sample or 14-week sample. That's pretty good. Mooney had more receiving yards than Drake London, okay? It was only by 7, and London had more targets and everything. But again, the amount of times that Kirk Cousins in particular was able to hit Mooney on those deep outs, I mean, it was literally like the LeBron looking down at, the ball before he drains another 3. Automatic, with the things Mooney was doing there. So clearly got a bit misused during the final years with the Bears. Maybe Justin Fields wasn't always throwing the ball when he should. But as great as London is as a top 10 wide receiver, and we all agree with that, I wouldn't discount the possibility for Mooney to sneak into the back of the top 24 if everything goes right for him.
Yeah, everything we need to go right. Like if we look at Mooney, the big part here is right now on Underdog, he's priced as the wide receiver 47. So your main question here was like, hey, do you like prioritizing these guys? And part of prioritizing them comes down to what their cost is. We just talked about Drake London and a lot of runouts. He's a wide receiver 1 that you're a guy going in round 1. You're getting in a draft in round 2, so we like that. We're talking about another player here where I think you could easily, Ian, even if he didn't make it to wide receiver 24, like very easily Mooney could be a wide receiver 3 this year. And you're getting to draft him as a wide receiver 47. And I do think some of that comes down to the way the splits worked out over a small sample, which it's not going to be that dramatic. I will say this. I will say that I think that the style of play with Kirk Cousins, a very anticipatory thrower, right? Not the strongest arm, but reads defenses really well, knows where to go with his reads. It was really a hand in glove fit with what Mooney does. Yeah. When you look at Penix, and we're going to get more into him in a minute, he's kind of got more of that style of, that's my dog over there. I really don't care how you want to go. You want double coverage? I don't care. I'm still throwing it. And Drake London fits the profile of being the kind of guy that you can do that with, which is really the old Brandon Marshall is I'm never covered. Right? I may look like I'm covered, but I'm open. Michael Irvin used to be the same way. Oh, great. You want to double me? I'm still coming down with the ball. So Drake London, like a really good fit with Penix. But to your point, again, I think the price tag here on Mooney is pretty funny at wide receiver 47. If you look at him, like his underlying data points, he really did flash early in his career, kind of that wide receiver 3 potential. And then last year we saw him, to your point, really look more like a wide receiver 2 for a lot of the year. But if you look at all the underlying data points in 2024, 12.1 fantasy points per game, that's really like a wide receiver 3 territory. 21% target share, that's really wide receiver 3, maybe borderline wide receiver 2 territory. 1.88 yards per route run, also wide receiver 3 territory. So PFF receiving grade, same thing. So I think at the end of the day, he's a wide receiver 3 type talent. And that's enough by itself, right? And you're getting to draft him as a wide receiver 4. So I do think that there's value here with Mooney. I will tell you, I'm not going out of my way and drafting Mooney all the time. It really depends on my build. But man, I don't think there's any way to say that it's not a value right now.
I think he's priced almost exactly where he should be. I mean, Ricky Pearsall, Jacoby Myers, Matthew Golden. When these guys are usually there ahead of him, I'll probably, be throwing my darts that way. But yeah, they are actually cheaper options. And then once you get past Mooney, that's when you have the Brandon Ayuks of the world, some of the rookies who, maybe are in less clear passing situations, Michael Pittman amongst others. So Mooney and London, again, should be seeing the majority of targets here. I am with Dwain, though. I can see a disparity growing because Penix really does have that F it, London's down there somewhere attitude. That Cousins, at least, at that age of his career, coming off the Achilles, maybe couldn't do quite as well. Final note, Dwain, we do have wide receiver 3 here, Ray McCloud, coming off a career year, man, where he managed to put up, I think, far better numbers than many would have anticipated. Yeah, I'm still a little bitter that I drafted so much freaking Rondale Moore, expecting him to be in this role last year, and then he had a season-ending injury, but that's neither here nor there, Dwain. But thoughts on Ray potentially being someone where, again, literally last round of the draft, you need a wide receiver. Hey, at least this dude's starting in a passing game move that we could see participating in their fair share of shootouts.
Yeah, you're either wanting a bring back or you're stacking up with Penix in a best ball. Ray McCloud is a player I like. I've drafted him on 10% of my teams. Right, which is that's not nothing. And it usually does come down to the scenario that you just said. But I mean, we're talking about a guy that had a really large role. If we look at the offensive coordinator and the consistency we've got going into year 2, this is from the McVay tree where they love to run 11 personnel all the time. I think Ray McCloud's going to be out there, man, 75, 80% route participation, and you can get him in the last round of a best ball draft. And you guys have to remember this. A lot of times in best ball, people think, oh, give me the guy with the most upside at that last pick. Well, by then, man, we're picking, if you're going with a rookie, you're taking a guy that's like a round 4, 5, 6 pick. Not saying that can't ever work. People are going to point to Puka Nacua. But, Ian, you've done the math on this. We've looked at the supermodel with it. Like, the hit rates are so low on these later round pick rookies. So, like, Alec Iomanner, I like him. I'm not saying he might not be something by the end of the year. But really, Ray McCloud, I feel pretty good. Is going to be on the field 75 to 80% of those plays. And, man, he's going to run into 1 or 2 spike weeks. And all I'm hoping is those happen when the receivers that I took earlier, in the draft are not having their best week. So I do think that Ray is one of these guys at the end of drafts that kind of fits into that mold. We know he's going to get playing time, but he's not getting treated the same as like Darius Slayton. He's honestly Wan'Dale Robinson for free. Yeah, I mean, he's Wan'Dale Robinson, and you can get it, and he's not even being drafted half the time. So I do like Ray, and I think that's a great call out by you, sir.
Hey, appreciate you, man. But again, it's one of these situations where I would love just to ignore Ray McCloud as well, guys. But you look at it, and yeah, wide receiver 66 last year, which is bad. But Rome Odunze was wide receiver 64. All right, so the numbers did add up. And again, if it makes sense with your roster, you got someone who could get 90 or so targets again. I do think as a last round dart, Ray McCloud deserves a little bit of credit. Someone you will not be able to get in the last round of fantasy drafts, though, is the guy that you might actually have to spend the first overall pick on. Of course, we're talking about workhorse RB1, Bijan Robinson, who had himself one heck of a year last year. Dwain just maybe got a bit overshadowed by guys like Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, really putting forward monstrous seasons, obviously on teams with a bit more, real life contender ambitions behind them. So thoughts on Bijan potentially being the overall RB1, because again, if you did want to go between him and Saquon, I think we would agree. We love playing this game. Okay, aliens invade tomorrow. We got to pick an RB1 for planet Earth. I think we'd agree Saquon probably a little bit better than Bijan, pure talent. But hey, fantasy, not always all about talent, and we do like the potential for receiving production more so on Bijan's side. So talk about, again, that discrepancy, and if you have considered actually moving Bijan ahead of Saquon.
Well, I mean, if we think about tiers correctly, right, instead of being these complete sickos, and we do this to ourselves with rankings where we have to choose one over the other, and we get it, we're trying to help because you guys may play in one fantasy league. Right. And you're going to have to make that decision. And so you're having to think about why you might take Bijan, why you might take Saquon. But hopefully in today's landscape, with all the best ball that's out there, all the great high stakes games that are out there, our society, you're playing in more than one fantasy league. We really hope that you are. Ian and I are stupid. We play in too many, and we'll tell you that. By week 7 or 8, we hate managing our waiver wires. But at the same time, if we thought about tiers correctly, Saquon and Bijan are in the same one. We're really saying either one of them could finish as the running back one. There are pros and cons to both players. We like the Eagles' offense better, right? If you tell me today to pick which one's going to score more touchdowns, I'm picking the Eagles, right? In a landslide. I know it's going to be the better offense. Which one has the better offensive line? It's definitely the Eagles. But I like Saquon's offensive line. Okay, you said it. You talk about the talent. If I just had to choose, I'm going to go with Saquon. But man, it's pretty close. If you look at Bijan Robinson, over his first 2 seasons, 4.7 yards per carry. Okay, guys, the average in the NFL for a starter is 4.3. He's well above that. So he's top 6 worthy when you think about historically the way that if we look at fantasy production from running backs, right? So the top 6 running backs have typically been in the range that Bijan's been in. Yards after contact, he's running back 1 worthy. Missed tackles forced, 23%. Running back 1 worthy. Explosive rush rate, so those are carries of 10 plus yards or more, 12%. Also running back worthy. Target share, freaking 14% over his first 2 years. That's running back worthy. Maybe not where we kind of hope Bijan might end up, being like a 17, 18% guy, more like a McCaffrey or more like a Kamara. He hasn't reached that, but he's the next down, man. So he's checking all of these boxes for us. And when you look at Saquon, a lot of things, Ian, that we thought could go wrong for Saquon last year actually did, but he covered up for it with 7,000 long runs, right? That ultimately really negated it. But if you looked at it, was he involved in the passing game that much? No, because you got freaking A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert, and then Jalen Hurts likes to scramble. So, I mean, I think it's a near lock that Bijan Robinson is going to get more targets than Saquon Barkley. He's also probably going to get just as many carries as Saquon Barkley. So I think the volume is actually going to lean towards Bijan. We just like Saquon's offense slightly better, and the fact that, to your point, Saquon was the alien last year that no one could stop, and a great offense behind a great offensive line. But it's a tier. There's a reason we tier these two guys together. It could very easily be Bijan Robinson as the running back 1 this year in his 3rd year in the NFL.
It was funny, Dwayne, because I've heard a lot of people, again, just more so go with the age concern, but also the touch concern for, Saquon coming off his huge year. But I've also even heard the curse of the RB1, where you go back and you look at the year after performance and you get this stat saying, oh my God, no running back in fantasy football is repeated as the overall RB1 since Priest Holmes all the way back in the early 2000s. Well, Dwayne, I took the liberty of looking at how RBs 2 through 5 did, and lo and behold, would you believe this, Dwayne? RBs 1 through 5, on average, all do worse the following year, okay? It's almost like scoring this many fantasy points is hard to do, whether you finish RB1 or worse. The RB5, overall, man, curse of the RB5, Dwayne. My gosh, we cannot go anywhere near Devon Achane, I guess, because they've done worse each and every single year of the past decade, even more of a drop-off than the overall RB1. So, again, I'm trying to split
Ian, I'll one up you one more. The whole position.
Yeah,
The whole position is the least predictive year over year. Wide receivers and tight ends are more predictive. You can't draft running backs at all. You can only pick them up as free agents. That's the new rule. So yeah, man, if you look at the utilization score, like for running backs, it's actually one of the strongest in season. Once we get to in season and we have a 4-game sample, rolling 4, predicting what's going to happen in the next 4 is very, very strong for running backs. But once you move to season over season, the utilization score for running backs loses the most value versus the other two. So this isn't new. This is something that's been going on a very long time. And we've talked about a lot of the issues that go on with running backs, Ian. You know, we talked about the injuries. Yeah. We talked about it's a spot, man, where coaches are more willing to mix things up. If they think they get a guy that could be better inside the 5, they'll mix them in. Somebody else they can use on passing downs. They'll do those sort of things. Wide receivers, for the most part, right, if they're good, they're just on the field all the time, right? And they get to stay out there, and that's more consistent year over year because wide receiver is a very, very talent-driven position. We're not saying running back's not a talent-driven position, but at wide receiver, like if you can't get open and you can't, earn the targets from your quarterback, you just don't get to be on the field. So it's one of those things, to your point, it happens all the way down the board. I haven't done the research like you just did on looking. I think that's great at like the running back 2, 3, 4, and 5 and what the change is, but it doesn't surprise me at all because it's not an easy position to predict year over year.
So again, if you're picking top 4 and you want to prioritize Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, even CeeDee Lamb, I'm not going to call you crazy. And hey, if you want to take Bijan over Saquon, that's fine. Just realize, I think rationally, just assuming that injuries aren't any more likely for Bijan than these other guys, really tough to say this guy is, anything other than a top 5 pick. Again, I've honestly mixed in taking first overall on occasion just because I know that he is capable of that. And hey, maybe get a little bit of a different roster and other people picking at that spot. Final note in the running back room, Dwain, because as great as Bijan is, and trust me, he is fully expected to take the lion's share of touches here. In fact, only Saquon Barkley is projected for more total carries and targets this year. But shout out Tyler Algier, man, someone who during his rookie season actually was, being thrust into the lead back roll down the stretch, did good things with it. And you look at it now, man, through 3 years in his career, 586 combined carries and targets, 0 fumbles or drops. He has the longest such streak in the entire NFL. I did just knock on wood to hopefully not jinx the man. So if he drops the first pass of the year, go ahead and blame me. But Tyler Algier, Dwain, again, not expecting hardly any standalone production, but God forbid something happened to Bijan. He wins the lottery and takes week 4 off, for example. Not saying we'd be crossing out Bijan's name and just putting Tyler Algier as the RB2 overall, but I do think he would have a good case as a top 12 running back and accordingly should be one of the bigger prioritized handcuffs in all fantasy football.
Totally agree. One of my favorite articles that you do every year is whenever you rank the handcuffs. So I can't wait to see where Tyler Algier is. And I know there's different tiers of these things, but if we're talking about pure run out of, man, when you look at the backfield and you expect like that 1-for-1 handoff, maybe not in fantasy points, but getting most of the workload, Algier has to rank up there as one of the very top guys as far as like maybe he gets 90% of what Bijan was getting. But man, we have so many scenarios where it's like, we don't even know. The backup gets 50% and the third string guy is going to get 30%. But in this situation, it is one where I do believe 80 to 90% of what Bijan is doing, at least the touches and the opportunities, would go to Tyler Algier.
All right, guys, time now for everyone's favorite game, Cut, Marry, Start, and we are doing Pocket Passer Edition. Again, relative to ADP, but in this case, we really are talking about 3 guys more or less going in the same portion of the draft as it is. So, Dwain, again, Cut, Marry, Start, Michael Penix, Tua Tagovailoa, and Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, you know how much I love these games. I'm cutting Matthew Stafford. I am going to marry Michael Penix Jr., and congrats. I'm going to start Tua. Right? Yeah. Congrats to us. Tua. Yeah. I'm a cougar. Like Michael Penix he's old for being early in his career, but he's still a lot younger than me. But I mean, look, I'm starting Tua because we know when he's out there, dude, like he's doing his thing. The passing yards are going to be there. We get these spike touchdowns. Yeah, his ceiling overall isn't as high because he never runs, but Tua's been very consistent. Stafford's getting a little bit older, so I decided to cut him, Ian. He's dealt with some more injuries here, but when we look at Penix, man, I know it's the small sample size. He only averaged 14.9 fantasy points per game in those 3. But, man, when I look at it, Ian, 246 passing yards per game, 7.4 yards per attempt. Those are both well above the NFL average for the last 3 years. If you get his rushing yards per game, you did pick some good guys to compare him to because it's 3.7. Like he's like Jared. This is Jared Goff territory, Tua territory, Stafford territory, obviously. But man, there's just something about him. And I know people will talk about the 58% completion rate, but man, he had a 10.1 average depth of target. If you go back and look at since 2011, the average completion percentage for quarterbacks with at least 250 attempts that had an average depth of target of 10 plus, it was 59%. So he was right in line with what NFL quarterbacks do. But man, Ian, looking over at PFF, big time throw rate, 8.8%. Turnover worthy play is only 1.8%. So this dude's a gunslinger, man. And there's just something that he's the younger player. We already talked about it with Drake London, how willing he is to lock onto him. So there's just something you're going to love. That I have a feeling Michael Penix Jr., no matter what happens in his career, he's going to be one of your dudes. Because if it goes wrong, he'll probably be Jameis, which we know you love, or like some version of Drew Lock. But what if it goes really well? Like, because we do have guys that have this profile where it really goes well. So I just like the fact that you got a guy that's willing to push the ball down the field, man, and just get it to his playmakers. If it goes well, you know what it is? It's Baker. It's Baker minus like the big rushing season that we got from Baker last year. So yeah, man, I like it. I did run the floor ceiling on it in the variance logic over at Fantasy Live, ceiling of 19.6 fantasy points per game. I know that's not that 22 we talk about, but that's mainly due to the rushing. And he's at his median, he's at a 15.9. But man, maybe he can surprise us. He's still a young enough player. We see some of these guys get a little bit more rushing in their younger years. So come on, Michael Penix, give us like 15 rushing yards per game. Then we would really show you some love.
I think he is capable of it. Like if you made him to Stafford race, like Penix is blowing him out of the water, you know.
Right.
Like if we had that going on, that'd be sweet. He had the reported 4.59 40-yard dash. Now, again, he hasn't played like that in a while. That's what, some brutal knee injuries will do to you. But you do go back to, again, that Indiana tape, even before he got to Washington. You see a more athletic, mobile quarterback out there. Again, can we just go ahead and, to Dwayne's point, assign him 15 rushing yards per game next year? No, we cannot get out on a limb that far. But again, there's an upside here. And I do feel like that completion percentage, Dwayne, is just dragging down a lot. And it's not what's so cool about it. You have the high average target depth. You mentioned the high big time throw rate. I think the cool thing you said is he has all that and he's been limiting turnovers. The 3 interceptions he threw last year, one of them hit Kyle Pitts in the chest. Another one was a blown route that they actually talked about after the game. And then another one, I think, also hit Ray McLeod in the hands. So really none of those were even his fault. And the other thing that he even did great going back to his days at Washington, this dude's sack avoidance under pressure is up there with the best in the league as well. I put those two things on a chart, man. He's right up there with Lamar Jackson and Bo Nix as the best quarterbacks at avoiding mistakes. Again, small sample size, but my God, guys, if you got an extra 60 minutes this offseason, go back and watch that Week 18 fever dream between the Panthers and Falcons, and you will see exactly what Penix is capable of doing. Even the Commanders game, man, like they were going back and forth in OT. I know the defense couldn't exactly hold up their end of the deal, but I do think this could be a situation where, like the Dolphins, like, the Bengals, honestly, why couldn't the Falcons be this kind of middle-class, poor man's version of the Bengals, an offense that is good enough to score with pretty much anyone, and a defense that, let's face it, in recent history, I know they spent some first-round picks and try to reverse this, but can't stop anyone. So in this tier, man, I think I am with you where Tua probably deserves the benefit of the doubt, but I would say ceiling-wise, I think Penix beats both those guys.
Yeah, if Penix is to start, if he was able to run like he would, and to your point, theoretically, if we had to choose one of these guys, and we said, okay, we're gonna look at the genie, we're gonna bring it out of the bottle, let it predict for us, right? Who has 15 rushing yards per game, right, at the end of the year, and it was to pick one of these, the only name we would expect, like the genie to tell us, would be Michael Penix Jr. We know it's not happening for Tua. They don't ever want him to run, even when he does, like Mike McDaniel standing on the sideline, like just giving him that dad look, even though they're probably like the same freaking age. And then whenever you look at Stafford, like he just doesn't run anymore at all. So I think that there is a scenario here. Now, the big difference is, I love what you said with the Falcons. I've also heard Matt Harmon kind of talk about that one a little bit. I think you guys are both on to something that we could kind of have like this like carnival clown show thing going where you just got to race up and down the field. It does come down to Penix turning into a passer that can be in that like 270 to 280 yards per game, which that's a big step from what we saw last year in his 3 games. Now, could he do it? Yeah. He could, because Jameis is a guy that we've seen had stretches like that. So it really does come down to Penix being this guy. And I will say, like, just the gunslinger mentality is definitely there. if the coaching staff is willing to allow it happen. But to your point, maybe the defense just forces their hand.
Also, Kirk Cousins, still technically a QB2 on this roster. I understand the post-Achilles version, not as good as we were used to, and things did get ugly down the stretch. But there was a stretch there where things actually were going well. We had Cousins swag surfing after an overtime win. Look, relative to other QB2s in the league, at the minimum, Cousins is one of the most proven ones out there. Again, gives you that much more sense of security when drafting some of these playmakers, such as potentially Dwain, the starting tight end here. Kyle Pitts, who has finally kind of been left off, in the fantasy ranks of community. He's only drafting them about the tight end 16, tight end 17 in some of these early drafts, and for good reason. I mean, the guy was a tight end 17 in 2023, tight end 21 last year. So yes, he did gain over 1,000 yards as a rookie. That was awesome, but man, just so tough to get behind. I thought we were about to maybe see the breakout happen last year, Dwain. On National Tight End Day, Kyle Pitts scored 2 touchdowns, actually was finally looking like that big athletic beast who, is just basically too large and fast for linebackers to handle, and he can overpower safeties. So there were a few flashes last year, but man, just not enough. That said, still does profile as the starting tight end one in an offense we like for now. So just kind of stripping away everything we know about Kyle Pitts, do you think just the full-time role in an offense that we like enough and does have that gunslinger mentality, could that alone be reason to invest in Pitts, or are we just kind of done?
I mean, I'm kind of done. I mean, I don't mind taking him some in best ball, but no one that's, playing in a redraft league is going to draft Kyle Pitts this year, right? He would have to be like this waiver wire addition. I will say this, he has a unique ability, right? Really as a down the field threat that's never truly been unlocked. And if we go back to Penix, theoretically, Penix might be the guy that could unlock that in a way that we really haven't seen up to this point in his career. Now, last year in the 3 games with Penix, he had a 10% target share and a 0.88 yards per route run. So not really very good. It didn't happen in that time period. The issue with Pitts, for me, Ian, is early on, while the fantasy points were okay as a rookie, and then the next year they weren't really there, but the underlying data was all still there, which is kind of our process, right? Fantasy points first. Then we look if there's anything like reason for regression to take them back down to earth, or the opposite. Hey, is there anything underneath, the hood? When we pull up the hood, does it actually look like they might actually be worth more? And early in his career, we could say all those things about Kyle Pitts, right? The yards per route run, the targets per route run, everything was there. And it was just kind of Arthur Smith's taking him off the field. But over the last 2 years, man, that's all evaporated. Targets per route run have gone from 18 to 15% in the last 2 seasons. Yards per route run, 1.43 down to 1.33. ESPN open score, 43 down to 33. So it's just, there's nothing to hang our hat on here, right? Other than just hope. At this point, I'm out on Kyle Pitts unless it's a best ball draft, and maybe we'll change our mind by week 3 or 4. Man, he's a perfect match with Penix, but he's got to out target Mooney. You still got McLeod on the field as a third wide receiver. There's a lot going on, and obviously, we already talked about London being a beast. There's a lot going on here.
Maybe the injuries have been a bigger deal than necessarily we've given credit for. Obviously, had the MCL tear, in 2022, and I think there's even another, CL ligament involved in that. So certainly coming back from that was tough in 2023. And then he had the hamstring issue, going on in August last year. But man, I go through that and he's healthy this year. No, he's not. He's already dealing with a foot issue that I've even seen some people wonder if that could just more of a, hey, chill while we try to, find a potential trade suitor for you. His name has been floated around in that. So really, Dwain, I do think it was that last point you made that kind of got me out, because I was starting to go through it and you look at the names around them and it's not like they're the biggest deals in the world. I mean, Hunter Henry's, going within earshot of this dude at ADP at this point. But man, it was a sad reality that I caught myself being like, well, what if Kyle Pitts can just out-target Ray McLeod this year? That's how low we've gotten in this discussion. And the fact that's even a question, I think, tells us all we need to know. So you might have asked me this before, Dwain, so I'll throw it back to you. What will your reaction be, though, if we're sitting here, week 1, Sunday night recap show? Always love getting those, out hot and ready for you guys. But Kyle Pitts, 9 targets, 6 catches, 80 yards and a touchdown. Are we going to be back drinking the Kool-Aid immediately?
I don't think we'll be back immediately, but obviously there will be tight ends that sucked in week 1 that people will have drafted, right? And so they'll be having to make a decision, and there will be enough of a track record, right? The super high draft capital we did see over his first 2 years, all those underlying data points, even though the fantasy points might not have been there, were there. So yeah, I don't see us being in an all-in moment, but I definitely see us putting in a recommendation to say, look, this guy's still a young player. Sometime I remember not too long ago, Ian, like 4 or 5 years ago, how long we knew it took for tight ends to break out. We've been spoiled by Sam Laporta. We've been spoiled, obviously, by Brock Bowers. Those two things are now in our minds of you're good as a tight end in year one or you now suck. And all this stuff we're talking about here, like Dalton Kincaid's like a similar, right, kind of player. But Kyle Pitts, right, really had better underlying data points than Dalton Kincaid early in his career. So I would say we would be recommending him, but I don't think that we would be all in unless one of the other pass catchers was hurt. Like if suddenly we knew we don't want this to happen, but if Mooney was going to be out for 4 to 5 games and we saw Pitts do what he did and it was matching up well with what Penix does, then we might be a little more aggressive then.
Last stat I'll leave you guys with from Ron Stewart. Nice little follow on Twitter. PPR points through a tight end's first 61 career games. Kyle Pitts, 520.7. Noah Fant, 520.7. That one just especially hurts someone who's been drafting quite a bit of Fant over the years. So we'll see what happens. But Dwain, that is going to go ahead and take us to our win total discussion. We have the Falcons sitting at just 7.5 right here. I want to take the over, all right? I will say this is one that I'm not necessarily going to be putting the mortgage on, but 7.5 feels low for a team that I do think did enough on defense. Yes, it wasn't ill-advised for them to send their, 2026 first-round pick to the Rams. It was, but man, this pressure and just the pass rush for years has been such a freaking hole. I don't blame them for actually trying to finally go out of their way to spruce it up. So again, I think there's enough additions on defense. Meanwhile, we still got Jesse Bates holding down the fort to believe they can maybe get closer to average. And then I just think the offense, again, looks like they can keep up enough with games where could this team go 8-9, 9-8? I think that's on the table. So give me over 7.5 wins. What say you, Dwain?
I'm going to go under, but everything really does hinge on Penix because they're going to need to win through their offense. They're going to have to win these shootouts, and there is the potential for it to happen. But, man, just when I look at the defense, all the challenges, that they have, like it's just enough where I'm like, man, I'm going to go with the under. 7.5 is like set really strong, right? The last 3 years, 8, 7, and 7 wins for this team. Definitely the offensive weapons are there. The firepower is there. So if Penix can take that next step, right, and kind of go back to that senior year at Washington, and he suddenly looks like that, then they're going to beat this number. But I'm going to go with the under.
Again, over, under, whatever, because I think they're going to be one of the more exciting teams out there for better, hopefully for Falcons fans, maybe for worse, though, for all of us Red Zone viewers otherwise. But, guys, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Fantasy Life Show. Like and subscribe if you're into that type of thing. Otherwise, just have a great rest of your day. So for Dwain, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, take care, everybody.